All right, for some reason the record button doesn't show up when I got that on. So yeah, so welcome. Today it's part of our series that we're promoting from the working group as far as our teaching and learning. So you'll see a little icon with a little owl. So today we're going to kind of go over curriculum design and lesson planning. And one thing I just wanted to talk about is that, you know, you might notice we have Robbie with us today, Robbie Morrison from Virginia. She's filling in for Erica. Erica was working on several others. So we switched it up and Robbie decided to join me for today's presentation. So that's a little different than you would have gotten the original notice when you had signed up. So I'm Kim Pond and I'm from the University of Massachusetts and on the Amherst campus. And does Robbie want to introduce herself?
Sure, I'm Robbie Morrison. I'm with Virginia Tech. I'm actually a 4-H youth development agent there as well, working at the county level, but I also work with a lot of state initiatives too. So
awesome. So one thing we are going to be using today to collaborate, because along with being recorded for us, some are going to be using this as professional development with other groups. So we did set up a Jamboard and I put it in the chat. Has anybody not used Jamboard? And that we can go over a little quick tutorial as we need to as far as how to use it. I will pull that up because we found Jamboard has been working pretty good for these sessions. I'm going to stop sharing. And if you want to pull up, depending on what you have in your, if you have a double screen, you can pull it up. So let me pull it up. And I have to admit that this is my first time actually using a Jamboard as a presenter.
yes, Karen, did you have something to say? Yes.
Yes, real quick about the Jamboard, I noticed that it needs to have editing access. Because right now,
right.
I don't see it.
Okay.
You can just change the setting where it says share, the blue button.
Oh, I gotta move you guys over.
Oh, okay. So just make sure that it says editing.
Yeah, all right. Thank you for that. Anna is serving as our tech support today. She'll be monitoring the chat and things for us. So you should be able to get into it. And Annette, I see you have your hand raised.
It was just who hadn't been exposed to Jamboard.
Okay. So just a little, and depending on how familiar you are with Jamboard, can everybody see it on the screen? So we have several pages set up. So at the top, you'll see that there's actually little tabs. We have several pages set up that we'll be using today. So it's kind of all in one place. And then on the left here, you have several options. And one of the ones we like to talk about is actually, you know, the Post-it one here is a sticky note. So that's usually one of the first ones people start to use to populate. But you'll notice you can actually write, highlight, you can add a text box. So an example of a sticky note is you can select your color. So if you were associating with it. So one of the things we're asking is, what does curriculum mean to you? So you can type something in here. And you can just do something simple like a plan of action with activities to achieve a goal. I could read a more official one later. And then you basically just hit save. And if you notice, it populates on the screen. And then it can be dragged. So this is just an example. So I'd like to take people, you know, have people take a minute and say, when you hear the word curriculum, what does it mean to you? Series of lessons, awesome. And feel free through today's webinar to add things to any of the pages as we go. So if you think of something later, you know, feel free to go back to the Jamboard and add it in. Awesome, content of topics, the audience will learn, plan of action. Awesome. Give people a few more minutes. So this is great if you're doing planning to collaborate, because eventually, if you had several like topics, if you were asking like what activities we wanted to do, then you could even organize them and put them in sections. and kind of collaborate that way. Okay, these all tie into maybe space, these tie into healthy living. And if you could organize them that way. So this is, we're just looking at curriculum. So a lot of common threads are coming up, a set of lessons. So one of the things I came upon when looking at it from an educational point of view and from training, it's like, it's basically refers to a lesson of academic content that's taught. Particularly, it's used a lot with schools to say if a teacher has a curriculum, it's a set of activities they have with standards and assignments and materials that organize for a particular course or to reach certain objectives. So basically, one of the things we do in 4-H is if we're trying to teach certain themes, we can put activities together similar to how our curriculum books or project books, people call them, are put together. There are a series of activities that kind of tie to some skills and objectives that we want the youth to achieve in that particular project. So that's great. Does anybody want to unmute and share anything that they've added or comment? We have a small group, so we definitely can be a little informal. All right. So if we read these,
I was going to say this was not my comment, but I thought it was a good one, a guide for teachers to help them meet learning goals. I think curriculum, a lot of times we think about curriculum, we think about starting with the goals in mind. So I think that was a good one.
Right.
Thanks. Kim, I'm new on this. I have the Jamboard, but how do I see you as well as, you know, if I only have one screen, do I have to sign in on a different
No,
computer?
if you have options toward the top of how you view it. So you can do speaker view and have participants on the side, but are you on a computer or an iPad or
a computer?
All right, so you should be able to, like the top where your pictures are, where you see view.
Yeah.
You can like choose show grid, you can choose speaker view. You should be able to toggle through of different choices to get an appearance that might work best for you.
All right.
So yeah, so try that and
Okay.
see if one works well.
Thank you.
If not, I'll stop sharing a while and you can see me.
I see you. I can't see what you're sharing. I guess that's the thing. I see the
Okay,
board
yeah. Up at the top.
Anybody else?
I was going to say at the top, if she sees where it says standard side-by-side speaker, that might help too. I don't know. In the Zoom itself.
All right.
All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I know every time you get in and I'm using a different platform, so. All right, so this is a great start to a discussion of what curriculum means, because sometimes people, if they don't come from an educational background, might have a different where they came into it as far as what they think curriculum is. So it's kind of a great starting point to think, well, what is curriculum in the first place and what does it mean? But then the next question is also as important is, my stop share button is over there. Our sources. So when you are planning a program, where are some places that you go to find curriculum? And one of the common, of course, a lot of people probably go to Shop 4-H, but what other places may you go to find things? Other states, yeah. One we use a lot is the Utah Club Discovery ones, which is really good. Yep, Project WET. And they could be activities, not necessarily curriculum. Because one I tend to use for science is Instructables. They have a lot of things, even for crafts like knitting and stuff. And if you don't know the link, you can always just put the name. I've kind of got some links up here. Another one I tend to use with aerospace a lot is the Civil Air Patrol. I got familiar with that when they had us jury the curriculum years ago. but they have a lot of resources on rockets and aerospace, also than Google. Yeah. Any others? So we can keep populating it. Professional organizations. Awesome. So you guys can keep populating that. I'm going to stop sharing for a minute and just get you guys back on my screen. So as we can see, there's many places we can go. And if we're going to Shop 4-H or other land grants, a lot of times they incorporate the experiential learning model in. But if we're finding things just off Google or things they might set up more for a classroom or not have those components, sometimes you will have to, look at those and see, and we'll touch upon that, a little bit later in the discussion is how would you adapt them to put into a curriculum if it's just an activity, but also how to bring that experiential learning model into it. So I'm going to then start sharing our presentation and turn it over to Robbie to go on to our next thing here. So I will bring the presentation back up.
Okay.
Or do you want to share your screen, Robbie? What would work best?
Well, you can bring the presentation up if you want, that's fine. Basically, and it's not really critical that you do because it's basically the 4 pillars. You can just, we're going to talk about them real quick. The 4 pillars when you think of 4-H are healthy living, as you see there, civic engagement, STEM, and agriculture. So those are ways that when you're doing curriculum, you think about what are the different ways that you can do these particular types of curriculum in this particular area, but also think about when you're doing, let's say, for example, STEM. A lot of people don't think of STEM in healthy living, but how could you incorporate STEM in healthy living? How could you incorporate healthy living into civic engagement? And so when you're looking at each of these, and we can talk more about each one, but and I don't know, do we decide we're just going to stay in one group since we only have about 15 today?
I think we can stay together unless people want to go more in depth on a particular one.
Okay, I think so as well. Well, with this, mainly is, and especially with people that don't have, and I think STEM is a really good example of that, is you'll have teachers that want you to come into the school system, or they're at the state level working with agents, for example, that may not have a particular bent or have a particular background in STEM, for example. And sometimes they will actually steer away from that because they don't feel as competent in it. But if they'll really think about what they're already doing, and I think it's a very empowering thing for youth to see STEM in a lot of things they do. Now, I know I'm focusing on STEM, but we can talk about some of the others as well. But when you're looking at healthy living, let's just have a little bit of discussion. If you're looking at really all 4 of these, where can you see a healthy living project? Maybe even think of mention a healthy living project here. Where can you see STEM or civic engagement or agriculture involved in a healthy living project? I'm asking you a question. So go ahead and let me know. You can put it in the chat if you'd rather, or just talk out. What are some of the things that you see? Farmers markets we got here. Okay, very good. Okay, so you're working with the farmers market, which of course is agriculture. So let's talk a little bit. How is a farmer's market? How can we incorporate some of these things with the farmer's market? We've got youth gardening and healthy food demos. That's good. Okay. Let's take the one that's mentioned about healthy farmers. So let's just take it apart a little bit. What are some of the things that we could do or incorporate if we're working with a farmer's market? And y'all can just speak up and share. We want this to be real conversational. So speak up and share if you'd like.
I'll share a county level project. We have a farmer's market in a very rural area, and our small business development, which is also affiliated with Extension, has welcomed our 4-H garden project kids and any youth to have a booth for free. But also, if you're looking at curriculum, tying in the healthy living of what they're growing and eating, as well as the how-to on the gardening in and horticulture side. So all that can be tied in. And then the civic of being an entrepreneurial and providing them with the life skills and learning how to market themselves and do math correctly and keep track of their expenses as a business. It all ties together in lots of different project areas.
Yeah, that's great. You've actually brought in a career-oriented project there too. So that's great. Yeah, all of those things actually pull together. And we can see that in a lot of different areas. Let's see, I believe there was another one in the chat and check too. We have youth gardening. They've already said about healthy food demos. That is a definitely good fit, how they work together. How could you bring youth gardening? You're already doing agriculture, right? Okay. And how could you bring youth gardening? How can we make it civic engagement or community service? May have any ideas? Okay, we got
Sorry. I
donate
typed
food
it
to,
to-
yeah, donate food to the food pantry. Did someone else say something?
No, this is Kim. I sent it to Wendy, but planting a row for the hungry.
Okay, that's really
Same
good.
thing as the donating. Yep.
Mhm. Well, I know just here, we just recently did, due to COVID, we were addressing an issue, which was a civic engagement issue. A lot of people didn't have as much food. A lot of people were out of jobs and things, and then COVID hit. And so how are we going to address that? We brought agriculture into it. We actually brought some STEM related things into it as well by bringing 4-Hers that had booths that gave out information and all done in a very safe way. And so that's a great way to do it. Okay. We've got another one here that says high school help with elementary youth grade gardening. Okay. Okay, great. You know what? That brings in community service and mentoring as well. So I think that that's great. Now, were there any other things we wanted to mention about this, Kim, this particular area?
Well, just to keep in mind that there are four, and a lot of times, if you're looking at Shop 4-H curriculum, those cross threads are sometimes there. But just to think, if you're looking at another activity, that how can you go further? And we'll show an example of how our military partners kind of use our curriculum and share ideas with their staff in a minute.
And I will say along those lines, when you're thinking, how can you go further? I believe that is honestly where you get a lot of your empowerment for your youth, because they come up with a lot of those ideas if you just let them. And if it's their idea and they're empowered to do it, you'll be amazed at the leadership that well, you're not amazed, those that work in extension, but it is amazing to me almost every time I see it happen from youth that get involved in a project, something they're very interested in, and it may even take a turn far, sometimes away from what I was thinking, but due to their ideas, to take a turn and do what they were interested in. And it's amazing the empowerment that you get for those youth. So, I'm going to turn it over now to Kim. We're going to go on to some other, our next slide here.
All right. So for those of you that maybe had been on the first webinar that happened on the 3rd or has looked at the recording, Jessa had put together in her team this lesson plan template that if you needed to adapt it, you could use this as a planning tool. So this is available for PDF too, but if you haven't and you wanted to look at this resource more, you can go back to the first webinar on the 3rd when they really went into this as far as planning out activities to make sure it does, imply the experiential learning model. So you'll see they have it down here as the 5-step process. And so you got the do, the reflect, the apply, and in there broken down. So it's just a planning program to see that how you can set up, what are your learning objectives? What are you hoping to get? What materials you're using? So basically, if you haven't done the activity before you're planning, this is just a tool that you can use to help you, especially if you have to do certain assessments. What type of assessment? Is it going to be like a project-based curriculum where they'll have a final project or portfolio in the end that they can present, or will there be a more formal assessment with a pre and post? Will you be using, another type of assessment? What is needed as far as assessment went? And then also, what's your overall impact? So this is just a tool that they kind of adapted from one that was out there. So they dressed it up a little bit, but you can do this with anything, just as a planning group. Does anybody have any questions or? All right.
They might want to know how to get this. So.
Yeah, I don't know if it's up on as a resource on the site yet. They had shared it, but I do have the PDF for this. So we can put that definitely in the link later so people can have it to get to the document. I don't know if Wendy knows if it's up there, because I know you've been working with them on getting the webinars posted after the fact. I definitely can put that in the chat. I just wanted to pop back up a little bit because I wanted to show you. This is some of the curriculum, like where to find it, that we did. And some of the ones that came to mind are the Ohio 4-H Learning Labs, which a lot of us may have in our office and use for some of the animal science projects, whether it's swine, horse, dog. They have a really great set of hands-on materials in those that work really well. Another one, if you haven't done a lot with our military programs, the 4-H Military Partnership page has a lot of wonderful resources, and we're going to show a little bit of theirs in a moment to show you. They're very similar as far as we have our 4 pillars. They have similar 4 categories that they work to develop their youth. That's very similar, and how they've taken a look at our curriculum. I just figured I'd show that. And Wendy says she's checking right now on that document. And we'll see where that is. So hopefully she'll get back to us. If not, we can follow up because we have the signups. We can get back to you. So I'm going to stop sharing for a minute. And by a raise of hand, how many people have been to the Military Partnership website? All right, a few people. I know when we were really involved with Operation Military Kids with many states, it was a little more, but great. I see some hands coming up. But for some of our newer staff that maybe have come on since then, may not be familiar with the Military Partnership, but they have one called Up for the Challenge, which has a tons of healthy living activities in there that are wonderful to use. They also have a lot of science-based curriculum. And one thing that they have designed for their staff, which I'm going to share because I think it's important, and I'm going to go to the website because I tried to put the images into our PowerPoint and they're a little blurry and hard to see. So I figure I'll just go right to the source. But to think about what topics you're going to do, because they do have them on photography and a bunch of different resources that you can go to. So what are some popular topics that people are looking that you teach? Is it healthy lifestyles? What are the main project areas people are working with?
Electricity.
Electricity.
Weather.
Weather. STEM.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
We do some career building, like
food and nutrition, careers.
Mm-hmm. There's drug use prevention.
All right.
Of STEM.
Yeah, a lot of STEM, which is kind of my background mostly. So I'm going to show you one of they call them express guides, and this one focuses on aerospace. So it's made in a booklet. So what you're seeing on the screen on the right is basically the cover, and on the left is the back page. But what you can see is, make sure I got the right slider here, is that pretty much broken down. So on the cover to the right here, they have the spark, flying, what would get kids excited about, learning about aerospace, and where might it take them to be creative. And then on the inside, they've got this nice layout that has the project goals. And they basically looked at the curriculum and picked 4 sample activities, what they call 4 fun activities, that they would like their staff to look at and be able to utilize. So they included it in here with a little brief description, the pages. So these would be great. And I've shared them with some of our 4-H leaders if they're interested in some of the topics that they've been designed for, and say these are really great to look at for ideas and then adapt it to the age group you're working with and the program and what your outcomes are going to be. So it's a great starting point, but you'll see that they bring in the life skills, they have the ages, and then on the right, it says the link into the Army, which they call their 4 areas and baselines that they work. And you can see they're very similar to what we call our 4 pillars. So they have one that's sports, fitness, and health, which is very, tied to our healthy living. They got the arts, recreation, and leisure, still kind of going to that healthy lifestyles with the balance and stuff, and also being physically active. Then they got their citizenship and leadership, and then they got their academic, which would be the concepts in this case around the concept of aerospace. So they kind of break it down similarly. So we could see easily how when Robbie was going through it, we could put one of those as ag and how would this tie into agriculture for one of our pillars. So it's a very, very concise, and I've always enjoyed seeing how they put things together. And then I've adapted a few that they didn't have for some of our volunteers. But then if you go down a little further, you can see they do remind them about the experiential learning model and how it goes. They have a character connection, and then they've got kind of to go further, like interesting technology and stuff to go in that they can pull in or give the kids resources to go further. So this is just a really neat way to kind of pull them together. And then I'll back up so you can see some of the other topics. But I just want to go back to the back page, and you'll see there's the community service and service learning opportunities to brainstorm. So if you thought aerospace, how many people would have thought to like beautifying the welcome center? And some actually have, lounges for the military personnel fly line where they have snacks and stuff and they have people there. So some things that you can, tie in. So it's a great brainstorming opportunity. It gives you some of those little ideas that then you can have the youth kind of have ideas and kind of go from it that get you started. So I figured I wanted to share that because I think they're great. Oh, and I got rid of my military partnership instead of going back. I'll bring it up in a minute. But if you go to them, like I said, they have over a dozen different topics that they've developed. So how many people would find them useful in your programming to kind of look at based at what you're doing? Drug use, prevent. Yeah. Awesome. How many people had seen those express guides before? All right, so I'm glad I was able to share that because it looked like not too many people were familiar with them. Some of them are a little outdated. They go for some of our older curriculum that's been revised since then. So you might look at the page numbers might be off a little bit, or the logos have changed as far as the cover pictures, but they're still great. So I will pull that link up later and we can go back to it. But while I'm doing that, I'm going to have you guys go back onto the Jamboard. And I want us to think about, and the reason I chose aerospace is because, as we know, last year's STEM challenge was around Mars, and this year's coming up is Galactic Quest. So what I thought on the Jamboard I'd like us to do in the 3rd page, which is breakout 1, which we're going to stay in, is think about how we can use some of these aerospace curriculum or ideas to take those activities further. Or how have you used last year's set challenge? Did you add anything to it? So how did you tie in, any community service with last year's set challenge? And if not, are there things you can think about to go with this year? So let's go into the Jamboard and kind of start to populate that. And I will pull up my military partnership one again. So when we come back as a group, I can show you the other. Does anybody need the Jamboard again link, or are you all set? All right, so let's take 5 minutes and populate that, and then we'll have a discussion. I'll put the Jamboard up. So far I got STEM Challenge Community on Mars. Oh, thanks, Anna. So one thing I'm thinking about for this year is, because we're doing some summer programming, is bringing in the whole healthy lifestyles and physical of astronauts needing to be careful of like muscle mass. So getting the kids to do some strength training or exercises at home as far as training to be an astronaut or to go to Mars or another planet. So bringing in some of that healthy lifestyles, talking about calcium and bone strength. So there's some of the things we were thinking about to bring into it to add. So those are some things, you know, you can do nutrition around how they're eating and how they maintain. So that's one that we can bring in some healthy lifestyles. Career development, definitely a great one. Engineering design. How about our agricultural pillar? What are some ways we could tie in with that? People may have done fast plants in the past or tied into some of the plantings and stuff that they've done to test things with space seeds that have been in space. Some students have grown them to see how viable they are when they've come back. How to recycle nutrients, drones, some sustainability on Mars. Yeah. So we can see if we wanted to organize these, we could even then, you know, okay, STEM here, you know, we got nutrition here, of food and nutrition. We could start organizing them by pillars if we wanted to. So Jamboards are pretty fun for doing that. Coding and drone, definitely up. Computer science can come in. So while people are adding, you can see how Jamboards can be efficient and you can actually organize and classify them as you go along. Leadership, awesome. Yeah, because just think about, you know, astronauts and all the training that they have to do and how people look up to them. They're kind of those role models. So a lot of times they actually become spokespeople too for things, which is great. Physics of how things fly. I missed that one. It's underneath the chat. And if you have trouble with Jamboard, you can always put things in the chat and we can drop them in too. But it looks like people are doing well. I'm just going to change our topic. Paper rockets. Yeah, if you look at some of the other things we've done, even some of the past challenges, motion and force. Awesome. Any pillars we missed that we need to get things on here? Got some other healthy lifestyles. And there's all sorts of career opportunities definitely in there that we can even elaborate on more as far as planning. So I know I'm excited that they're going to have a family kit again, that we can get hopefully more people engaged with that may not come to large event. We can get those out to smaller clubs.
And actually build involvement in the home. I mean, that's even COVID has brought about some negative things, but a lot of families have gotten involved more. And I think that that's gonna, that family kit's gonna be a good thing too for families.
Right. Yeah, and I think this year with still a lot of youth not being able to be vaccinated yet, I think it will be a nice opportunity for families to have that if they're not, ready to come to large events. If we're hosting bigger ones, that they can do it in a smaller area. Awesome. I think additions have kind of slowed down. All right. So this is just some of the things that you can kind of, when you're planning or when you have new events coming up, that there's some different ways that you can approach it and think about what are your overall goals? So when we have these set challenges, they give us some activities, but if you wanted to run it like in an after school program that has longer sessions, or if the club wants to focus on it, that you can actually add and expand on these things. So it's a great opportunity to brainstorm. And if they get into those community service projects, and like we say, if they're vested and they're coming up with these ideas, that's an added, because then they have opportunities for leadership. They can call and contact the food pantry and see what foods would be best for them. I know here in New England, some food pantries are requesting not to have fresh produce because of some safety concerns. So that's been a change up for some of our groups that had, done plant a row, that will be harvesting of where else, if their pantry isn't going to take it, where else might they get that food? Maybe it could go to a church that, or a soup kitchen that's making meals that can do it then. So we're always having to adapt. So a few things more coming in. Awesome. Any questions at this point? All right, I'm going to go to the next page in our Jamboard. And let's see who wants to pick a topic. Anybody have something out here? Because one thing I thought we would talk about is delivery modes and how we might use them. So what type of delivery modes are people working with, and how might they set a curriculum apart? So we can add a few here. Because how many do after school? And after school, monthly workshops. And we're getting into camp season, so camp would be a great one too. A project, summer workshops. All right, so with what coming in, we could see that like some of the summer workshops, monthly workshops, some of these might not have as long a time. So spin clubs would be kind of like some of the after school ones. Kind of see. Right, so when you're developing your curriculum along with thinking of where you're getting things from, what are your sources, thinking about your audience, the age. Some of the other things we've talked about is just how long are you going to have those youth and what tie-ins to the pillars you might add to that curriculum. But then how are you going to deliver it? What is your, your venue, and how often are you going to have them? So you can definitely see that if you're doing an after-school program that runs 8 to 10 weeks, or you're doing it as part of, a club project, they're going to have more opportunities to engage on the theme, rather than if you're doing like a monthly workshop. Maybe you'll have a couple that similar tie in with an overarching theme with concepts, but they're kind of standalone, that the people don't necessarily, if they missed 1 month, is going to inhibit them from full participation the next month. But maybe they're both on, say, healthy lifestyles with nutrition, but maybe one is more focused on, plant-based proteins and some recipes around that and the importance. Maybe one's more as far as, doing yoga. So they all kind of tie in with the objectives of developing a healthier lifestyle, but the monthly meetings might follow different topics, but it's not going to impede them. Sometimes when we think of after school, which I've done, is basically I like doing the project-based learning, that, sometimes it's more difficult if kids miss, but you can design it that they can jump in and focus on different aspects, even if they miss a week. but it's great to have that project at the end that they can put in a fair, that they can show for a parent, like if there's a potluck and the parents come a showcase, that they can see what the youth have done. So it's a lot of times it's working up to that. And with the aerospace, it's really fun because they love having a rocket shoot at the end that they can come and blast off, and they're very competitive to see whose design is going to be the top. So that's one that they learn different concepts about aerodynamics, balance and stuff in different session, and then it culminates to that. So if they miss a little piece, they can kind of catch up and talk to the other youth to finish building their rocket, and they'll still have that that project at the end and be able to feel success in the project. Training sessions for educators, professional development. Yeah, some of us work on the state, might work more with adults than youth. All right, so you guys can keep populating that, which is great. So I'd like to see if a couple people want to share maybe some of the projects that they've designed. How have you used curriculum design, and maybe a series that you have done in your state or your county? Okay. And Wendy did, if you're noticing the chat, they haven't started to put them in the archives, but they probably will be there soon.
Give a quick one, Kim, if you'd like.
Yeah.
We have an NRE program that we do, and we initially we're doing it with gifted youth. And when we got into the programs, this is why I think it's so important to look at what curriculum you're using. And we realized that after we did it the first year, that in the evaluation, they knew everything before that they did after. I mean, it wasn't a lot of knowledge gained there. They had a fun time, but it wasn't so like a lot of knowledge gained. So we learned from that. But so we took that and said, okay, well, what can we do? What is this group that we're working with? So we had to think about the design of that and how do you keep that particular not their age group, but that particular level, mental level, because we thought we'd done ages and stages, but it's just that they were a different group, and we need to keep that in mind. And so we designed it in a whole different way. We did an engineering design called Miss Muffet, and they had to find a way to keep to build actually thing to keep the spider safe, but not scare the girl. But how could you get rid of the spider without using insecticides? All kinds of things that these kids had to do, and they had to build it. So that next year, total different story. So thinking about that design piece was really important to be successful in our goals.
Awesome. And I see Molly shared one about a backyard birding project. Great one too. Molly, do you want to share that more with the group, or if you feel free to unmute and share if you'd like?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So I put together this project. It was kind of just a piloted project to see how it would go. I noticed that there was some interest in the county in doing more natural resources projects, and birding was something that we could all do during the time of COVID when we couldn't all go anywhere. So I wanted to put together something where 4-Hers could go out into their own backyard and have the opportunity to, spot these birds, get some learning in, do some fun projects, and just get involved. So we set it up that way, came with a guided project book that teaches them all about birding, different skills that they can use in backyard birding, some do-it-yourself projects like some recycled milk jug bird feeders, a 2-liter bottle birdhouse, how to make a bird bath out of household items that you have laying around. And we do a monthly meetup. And during those virtual sessions, they learn about 3 different native bird species. And we've compiled a list, and I pick from that list and do those 3 birds. And then they're able to send me pictures of birds they've spotted over the last month. And I feature those in the presentation, which gets them really excited. So then the kids get talking about, oh, I saw that same bird. And then we usually do a craft. So I had my 4-H teen leaders in my teen council put together craft activities, and each one of them has picked a craft to lead during those meetups, and we're concluding it in August. So it's been a lot of fun, and the kids really seem to enjoy it.
Great. Well, thank you, because I think we've noticed as a theme with everybody doing so much Zoom that families were looking for those, taking them outdoor and doing something that's still educational and constructive, but is getting them off the screen. Because I know we did some similar, and even for clubs, we're having a Earth Day challenge to get them to go out and then have things for the fair or compete for some prizes this fall. Anybody else have an idea to share? All right. Well, I can.
I was just gonna say what Molly had said was awesome. She also gave the kids choice, which I thought was really great as a part of that.
Yeah. The more we can engage and get their ideas is great once you get going. One thing we do every year is we look at the summer reading theme. And this year, if anybody's participating in their county, it's Tales to Tales. Tale is in the tale of an animal versus a story tale. And so what we've done is we've pulled our 4-H curriculum and kind of tied it back to what the libraries are doing, and also picked 2 of the books that are the featured author this year, which is Selena Moon. And we pulled it all together to this overarching thing of what they call adaptation. So the first book that we picked was Penguin and Pinecone, which basically talks about this penguin that washes ashore, and Penguin finds it and he develops this friendship with it, but then realizes it's not going to live where he lives and taking it back to the forest. So it's kind of a silly story, but it deals with friendship, but also we brought in biomes and how things are adapted to live in different areas. So that discussion. And since our target audience is young, we focused on just 4 simple biomes. We didn't go into all of them, but we figured forest, ocean, the Arctic, things like that they could easily identify in the desert. So, and then Ohio has one called Connect to College that deals with Cornelius, a hedgehog, and how he goes to college. And since our college students will be leading it, it's an opportunity for them to talk about adapting to college, but then also the adaptations of the hedgehog. And the reason we chose it is when it's curled up, its spine, it kind of looks like the pine cone. So it's a good transition from the first week to the next week to say, and then how hedgehogs have adapted. And then they go on to another one of Selena Moon's books called Penguin's Big Adventure. And basically penguins are from the South Pole, and he wants to break these world records, and he wants to be the first, penguin to go to the Arctic. So he goes on this big adventure. So we are bringing in geography, and again, adaptation of how animals adapt to the cold. And then on our 4th session, we are hoping to tie into some of our 4-Hers that have farm animals and talk about adaptations of animals on the farm, looking at feathers and wool and things like that to bring it in. So we've kind of taken what the libraries are there as a way to maybe we can support them. So we'll have a training for them to come on board too if they want to use some of our resources. But again, it's kind of this overarching thing on adaptation. So that's the objectives we want them to get through. But then there's simple activities throughout that if they miss 1 week, it's not really critical. I mean, they'll still get the theme of adaptation toward the end, but it is more, just for elementary school. So bringing in the reading and for some, trying to keep things educational and fun. And we know with that summer slide, so something to bring to agencies we work in using some college students. So there's all sorts of ways that things can be adapted, and I'm more than happy to share or invite you guys if anybody wants to join in our training for that, if you want to do something similar. So now we're going to switch gears, and I'm going to actually turn Robbie back on here, and I don't know if she wants to share or me, but one program that Extensions has started is what they call lesson study, and it's just a way for professional development. So if you're working in an area and stuff and want to learn more about lesson planning and how things work and staff development, it's just a great way to bring it in. So I'll turn it over to Robbie. Do you want to share your screen, or do you want me to pull it back up?
You can go ahead and share if you like. That'll be fine. Since you
Right,
already
let
have
me
it
just
here.
make sure I have it here to the right
If you don't, I
page.
can find it real quickly.
No, I'm just going to scroll down to make sure I have the right
Okay. Well,
slide to show.
as we're getting started, and this, there doesn't even on the screen for us to talk about this, how many of you have heard of lesson study? I know it's a little bit newer. I would say in the past few years. Just speak or just raise your hand if you've seen had anything to do with lesson study or familiar with it. Let me see if we have a few. Okay, so we don't have very many familiar with lesson study. Okay, well that's exciting then. So let's talk a little bit about what lesson study is. A lesson study basically is a lessons, and it's a methodology, and they give, you know, she's showing the cycle here, which I think is really good. But it's a way of reflecting on more of the community of practice. So agents get together and they decide on a curriculum, and they begin to look at that curriculum. As they're giving the curriculum, they get together and they discuss it. They talk about, in fact, it shows up there in the cycle, which I think is really good, formative data. They talk about it. What have they gained from it? What was good? What was bad? How can we implement and make this curriculum a little better? And so basically that is really the foundation of what it is. Okay, it's pretty simple, but let's talk a little about, we know basically what it is. So who benefits from that? And we didn't put this on the slide, but and even, what type of curriculum could you use? Can you use that with any curriculum? So let's just talk about that a little bit. Who do you think would benefit from this kind of study? Agents getting together, or not even just agents, but youth development people that are doing curriculum and studying that. They're doing the same curriculum and they're going to study that. So what do you think the benefits, or who would benefit from that? Now we could use the Jamboard again if we need to. Kim, do you think that would work? Or
what's the consensus? We can just discuss, or we can definitely open up the Jamboard, or you guys can add to the Jamboard too.
We just had someone put in the chat with staff was one. Okay, so staff could definitely benefit from that. Who else could benefit?
And when I put staff in, but it could be your county staff that maybe if you have a statewide program, it could be an opportunity as you roll out lessons to get feedback from them and then to network and share what's worked, what doesn't, maybe compare different age groups and what works best for, like, maybe say 5th grade compared to 3rd grade. So it's a great opportunity for that. And also your teen leaders as a way to share if you're training them to go out to do a program and come back. It's a great way for them to share with their peers.
And we've also got here 4-H agents and volunteers, of course. And I would like to speak a little bit about generational. When you think about someone just a seasoned agent as compared to a brand new agent, how does that combination work? I mean, in my mind, that's a very good combination, because a seasoned agent has an idea of what they've always done. And then the new agent is wants to give brand new ideas. And I think that's great, because seasoned agent can help see, oh, this is what worked for me. But then that new person that comes on that maybe has not had as much experience, but yet they'll have great ideas too. So I see that could be very helpful in that kind of situation. Now, any other things that you think who else would benefit from that? I know when I'm working with teens and I work with senior adults, I have a lot of things that I do with that generational work. It's one reason I mentioned that. I think it gives an appreciation, not just for your study itself, but being able to work more cohesive and appreciating what youth bring as compared to appreciating what that experience brings. Because sometimes there's a mindset, oh, they're old school, they don't know. And then there's the mindset that, well, oh, they're whippersnappers. I have so much more experience. But I do feel like that bringing those together are very helpful with this.
Another, go ahead.
No, you can go ahead.
I was just saying, another way that lesson study I really enjoyed is its shared leadership. So you set up roles originally. A lot of times people will rotate through. So somebody that's, the facilitator, then then the person that was the minute taker might be the, might lead and facilitate the next meeting. So there's opportunities for them to share. So it's not like, somebody owns the group. It's great that they rotate through the different positions. And usually there's 3. There's a recorder to keep people on time if you set times for discussion. There's somebody that's taking the notes, and then there's somebody facilitating. So it's a great opportunity for people to, especially if you have maybe some newer staff that maybe don't want to step up, yet, or don't want to step on toes, or some teens that are just getting into the group, that they can work through and they all have the same opportunities and stuff for those, to facilitate the groups and learn those skills. So it's kind of a shared, people getting together to share their knowledge, but they're also sharing the leadership. So.
Well, I think, Kim, what you mentioned too, the little tips about something like that, as far as, having a timer, making sure that is a shared environment. I think that's some good tips for lesson studies. I know that you've actually done some lesson studies that have been very successful. So I think those tips are helpful. So how do you think, let's talk about a little bit more, how do you think that you could utilize this in your program? So let's think about your program that you have now, or if you're at a state level, how you could use it there, but also how you could encourage your people that you're working with, maybe agents, how they could use it. Just write in the chat, or just speak on up if you like to. Just have a conversation.
And while people are sharing, I can just talk a little bit about what we've done. With the working group, our STEM working group, they had some of us that wanted to work together on some thematic monthly programs, get together and go through this lesson study project. So we did things in March, April, and May of this year. So March leading up to it was about Pi Day. So there was a set of activities somebody put together. We went out and implemented them, and then we came back and shared what worked, how we did it, and some of the successes, and maybe things that we added to it. So we shared resources to make it better for the next time. And then in April, we did it around Earth Day. And then in May, of course, it were around Star Wars and May the 4th be with you. So we kind of picked topics that were like timely and hot that people might want to do in their state or their county, but we kind of did it as a group. So you had that support, and somebody put some activities together, walked us through a little bit about what, how to do them. We went out and replicated them either virtually, hybrid, or in person, depending on where people were, because we were all at different stages this spring. And then we came back and shared, and even some ideas of, I'd love to do this again in person and implement it this way. So it was great for us to feedback to each other.
Great. It's definitely good. Any other ways that you can think of that could be utilized? Or we have another question of when would be a good time to use it. I know I'm thinking right now, we're in the middle of camp season for a lot of them. There are a lot of curriculum that goes on at camp even. A lot of educational materials that we use. And it could be even the beginning of the school year was my thought as well. So what are your some thoughts about when would be a good time to actually implement a lesson study? And some of you are at the state level here. So, and I know I work with a lot of state level things as well. For example, at the state level, quite often you give a curriculum, you put down a curriculum that you want everyone to use. Do you think that would be useful? I mean, to be able to do a lesson study with all those, I think that is especially a good time to do it because you know that a lot of agents are using that same curriculum. So, any other suggestions or ideas of what you think would be a good time to learn it? I mean, to use it?
I know here in Mass, I'm going to be focusing on the STEM challenge. And even though there's going to be some how-to videos and things are going to be posted, working with particularly our teen leaders and possibly some volunteers to practice ahead of time and then share through the lesson plan study. So they'll be ready to go the next time or in the fall. So kind of have a small group and then have them available to help us at larger events.
I will say that I don't think a formal lesson study has worked. I mean, I don't know a formal lesson study that's done with the Mars Base Camp or STEM Challenge, but think about how that could be helpful. People are using this across the United States. By having lesson studies and learning from that, how much you're going to benefit from that. And if you think about what a lesson study is, it's just basically helping you're learning about that particular curriculum that you're developing. But to me, you're learning from each other. And I know for myself, even I really enjoy our national conventions that we go to, but I enjoy the time in between, sometimes even better, because I get an idea and start talking to somebody about some lesson we've done in common, and they give me a great idea of what, of how to make it better, or I might give them a good idea of something. So I feel like that's really this lesson study cycle is incorporating that power of networking. So I can just see this being a very powerful tool for sure. And so also I know, Kim, that they would like to probably know where they can learn more about lesson study. So I'll let you explain that to them if you like.
Oh, I went back too far. I wanted to stop sharing. Yeah, so this is fairly new. A lot of states, I know there's been different extension programs that have used it more intensely than others. So there are some resources online that, there's a Journal of Extension article that has some links to different programs they have done. So there's a great article on why it's important and how best to use it. And there's a YouTube that basically is an overview of what lesson study is, if you're not familiar with it. So there's all sorts of resources that, you can utilize, and I can put the YouTube one in the chat if people want to check that out later. Down to the session. And Dessa, I see, has joined us. And Dessa, we were sharing your lesson study, your lesson plan from the first week. And we were wondering, I do have the PDF available, but I didn't know what's the easiest way if they wanted to grab that and use it.
Oh, let me click a link as a Word document, and that way they can edit it however they want.
Yeah, because I have the shared link, but I wasn't sure if that you did on the 3rd, but I wasn't sure if that was the same link that we should be sharing. So.
Kim, I did go ahead and share the link to
that image. Yeah, the image is in4h.org, but you have to have logged into your staff account because it's part of the professional development resources, like the toolkits they have. So if you just search it, you won't, but that's the link. So you might have to log into your account once you get there. I think that's what Robbie had to do when I sent her the link. And that's why it's not there for everybody in the public. So yeah, there's definitely the Journal of Extension article that, the YouTube is linked to. So that will give you some good reference as far along with the PDF of how it works. So it's a great, I think, staff development tool to use in your state, regardless of the topic that you're doing, because it allows, like I said, that shared leadership, but also it's the investment. So if people are invested and they're given ideas to it, it really helps, generate the program, but they're more apt to run with it because maybe they teach more healthy lifestyles and we're talking about, galactic quest and going into space. They might really tie into growing plants in space and the importance, or especially herbs to, the food and stuff to make it, tastier when you're gonna be gone for so long. So they can tie into that. And like I said, the whole exercise component of keeping your muscles up and how they do that and stuff, and how things are affected, without gravity when they're in search situations. So there's all sorts of ways to utilize it. And it's just, I hope some of you go and check it out. Because if you're like me, I work statewide and I'm kind of by myself, which is why I love the working groups, because I run things by my peers that are in other states doing science and then bring it back. But for me, doing this lesson study would work really well with some of our staff if there's certain things statewide we want to run, like Robbie said, because it's the opportunity for them to try it and then come back and talk and share their experience and stuff. A lot of time in staff trainings, you give them the nuts and bolts and then they go back to their office. But if they could try it with maybe one club or a few youth and get comfortable and then come back and share and hear from others before they do a larger event, it really, I think, increases the comfort. especially around, science, because I know like in our state, not too many are like in the science like me and like love it and geek out every time, are you excited for the STEM challenge? And wow, we're doing telescopes. It's so exciting. And I've got this resource, and I kind of just see them kind of like, they're like, so it's great to have those. So I'm hoping I'll get some of our staff or their key volunteers, because some TAPA volunteer to help them more running the programs in their teams, and them. They facilitate by providing the structure in the box, but they don't do the face-to-face training. So have them tap and have them come on to these lesson study groups so we can support our volunteers that are doing these things too.
Yes, and I was going to mention as well, Kim, when you were talking about that, it just brought up in my mind, we have a huge horse program here in Virginia, and I know a lot of people do. Just having those volunteers even do an actual lesson study cycle. They're doing the curriculum, they're working with the kids, whether it be, we have a STEM club too, but there's different clubs that we have, agricultural club. Sometimes I know for agriculture clubs across the state, sometimes in our area anyway, they want to raise the animal, but they don't always get the experiential education part of that. And so if they were able to work together and actually club leaders, I think it would help them build not just their knowledge of and help with the actual curriculum and all, but also in the camaraderie and them staying with 4-H longer and things like that too. So there's peripheral benefits of that as well. So
Right. And I think that's one thing with COVID, a lot of those things have come down and stuff. So this is something I think we can open up, and I think we be really receptive of our volunteers to come on board and be some of those, project-based, maybe lesson study groups, because now that they're familiar with Zoom and these things, if we can do some things virtual or hybrid, where maybe they come to an office, but the others can Zoom in and participate, it'll help support them more rather than they're out. So if especially if things are changing or if there's new hapology activity and stuff, you want everybody to incorporate. Maybe things have changed around safety or grains or something, and you want everybody to try a new activity. You could send it out and then they could come back together, either in person or a hybrid situation, what worked, what didn't, and stuff like that, rather than, just sending it out or here's the link to this. And because some states still do a lot of volunteer in development and have volunteer forums. I know here in the New England area, we don't have as many opportunities. And in our state, we haven't had a statewide volunteer training, where they could come pick workshops in a few years. So we're hoping that we can do some of these things this way to really support them and provide some more, fresh ideas and some of the new curriculum and get it out to them. Well, yes, are there any questions? I know we had a small group, so we ran through things pretty well. Would anybody like me to pull up the Jamboards again and kind of go through what we've populated? What do we think?
sure, if you'd like to.
Yeah, I'm just thinking if we want to kind of a review to see kind of
Just review
where we've been. I'll bring it back to the first page. All right, and then we can add to it. So some of the things, and as far as how this ties into the PRCK, which if you're not familiar, that's our association, kind of like guidebook for professional development. It kind of is broken down into different ways of, working with youth, curriculum design. So some of the things we were going to target here is more around the program design, learning and the curriculum development as part of this. So, tapping in, how to select and adapt and utilize the curriculum and bring it into experiences. So this is what we've come up with as far as what does curriculum mean? I think we did really good there. And thanks, the link is in the chat if people haven't seen it. It's also great for like self-assessment if you want to see where your strengths are. These are some sources of curriculum, and you'll have the Jamboard link if you save it, and we can add a few more to this as things go. So feel free to keep adding to that to share. But as you can see, we have, Shop 4-H has a wealth of topics for us to pick from. But our state land grants also, like Cornell, Utah, Ohio, they have a whole lot of additional resources, especially for new staff hires. It's great to let them know that there's, you know, not just shop 4-H, you know, that's not, there's so many more curriculum opportunities out there. They have a youth that comes to say, like, I had to look for one for geology, and it's like, okay, I have a youth that's really into geology, wants to do minerals. I quickly search extension 4-H geology, and, you know, I found that, you know, a university had a curriculum that I could get in touch with and send to that family to support the child. So they're great to have, to know that there's all the land grant resources out there to choose from. And then there's a lot of other, like Project Learning Tree, Project Wet, Project Wild, there's Aquatic Wild. How many have used them? Because they're wonderful resources to have to supplement what you're doing. I know we've encouraged some volunteers and provided stipends and paid for them to go to trainings to learn them. So they're another resource. One, Google, of course, and a lot of people, it's not up here, but like Steve Spangler for science, people will go to and look for activities. One I put up is instructables.com. It's a maker, basically, site for tinkerers, but it has everything from leather work, knitting, cooking, to all sorts of your other, like more computer science, electronics components. Ag in the Classroom is one I think quite a few people are familiar with. So yeah, a lot of resources that we can share with each other and go to have a few that, you know, but then to look at what the source is, like we know, is it from a university? You know, what kind of website is it from? If we're just getting it off of Google, you know, how do we know how it works? You might want to try it first with a small group at home and get feedback. What are the sources, you know, that they're using to do the program, and how you might have to add the experiential learning model or other elements that we use in 4-H to kind of pull it out. Yep, fellow educators, great. I have some of our homeschool families that share with me
I was
things.
going to say, Kim, that was part of our conversation we had, that how wonderful extension is, because sometimes we forget to ask somebody in a neighboring state, like you mentioned, or even in a county. For those that are county agents, just ask someone that has been, you know, doing that. I have a number of times we'll have on the listserv, people say, does anybody have this curriculum? Have you done something that works well? And it's amazing the wealth of knowledge. And when Kim and I were talking, is that, and especially in extension, we want to give it to you. It's not, nobody's selfish about what, no, this is mine. It's more, yeah, we want to help. And I actually love that part about the extension in general. So.
Right. Yeah, we're great at wanting to share ideas, why we create the wheel. And this is kind of just our STEM challenge. We talked about it with the Mars Bound Challenge and this year's Galactic, how we can bring in different components of our pillars into our discussion and our planning for that. So this would be great if people, you know, wanted to network, and we even could like share a document, start putting ideas in it. If people are interested in that, you know, you send me an email and maybe I'll set up a Google Drive or a doc that we can start populating ideas as far as how to use that, if that's something you're going to have to do back in your state and maybe you want to bring in more. Because one of the things when I first started was, it's funny, we did NASA back in the 80s and the 50s, and it like cycles through, but there was a Blue Skies Below Your Feet that basically brought in, there was a textiles component for fabrics and learning about how some of the astronaut suits and stuff were made. There was a food section and of course gravity. So it kind of was broken down into some of those topics that were popular to 4-H at that time. You know, food and nutrition, sewing and textiles, and it was pretty neat. So we've always kind of done that over the years. And then this is just some of our delivery modes to think about how we deliver programming and maybe what kind of activities are best, how to develop a curriculum or theme around that. And then what kind of evaluation or end product, you know, are they going to be able to have something to put in the fair? Is it going to be something like when the family come pick them up at camp, will they have a display of maybe masks that they've made and learned about, you know, how to, you know, the healthy lifestyles, you know, what about them? You know, they can make their mask and they could have them on display for the parents and then take them. So what kind of delivery mode, and just thinking about your objectives and how to take those activities and have something at the end. Because it doesn't always have to be a formal evaluation unless your state or you're required to do that. It can be these project-based things so that you can see that, oh yeah, they understand, they incorporated that concept very well in what they've produced at the end. Or they were successful. We do a lot with balls and tracks making roller coasters, and were they able to get the marble to go through 4 different elements to the end point at the end? And they're having a lot of fun, and they don't always realize all the concepts and technology and skills that they're learning. They're just trying to build the biggest roller coaster they can make. So those are all great things. So we're getting close to the end of our time. I know we appreciate you. Okay, so resources, I've tried to put some links into the PowerPoint, and we definitely can try to email some out to you. I do have your emails from the sign up. And I know Anna's going to put in, we have an evaluation for today. And for those that are interested or would like a certificate, we can provide a certificate of participation for today. And you also, I'll put my email in the chat when I can pull up the closing slide, but it might be just easier to put it here. And if Robbie wants to put hers in, you can feel free to reach out to us for if you want more information on lesson planning, or if you're having trouble finding things, we'll be more than happy to forward links. Oh, thanks. Any parting questions or thoughts from anybody want to share, or just what they're planning for the summer?
Camp.
Yeah, for us, like summer programming, camp, yep.
Day camps, yeah.
The kids are, yeah, I see other people shaking their heads, yep. Yeah, we're getting to be a very busy time. Awesome. Well, we thank you for your time. You know, if you would take a few minutes to pop on the link for the evaluation, it'd be very appreciated. These are part of our association's goal at 75 webinars for the 75th. That's why on the slide you probably saw that. So we're grateful to be a part of that initiative and provide these that you can use back in the fall. We know this is a busy time to do it. So participation is low, but we wanted to make sure that we had the resources. So as people get out of their mode of summer and camp planning, that they can go back to them and think about how to utilize these, you know, in the fall and stuff as they, you know, switch gears again and maybe have new staff coming on, new programs starting. So we thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Enjoyed presenting. So thank you.
And I will stop the recording.